you may have known from before, relative clauses describe nouns in the same way adjectives do. That is to say, when we say that they describe nouns, we say that they give more information about nouns, okay? And that is why we say that they are similar to adjectives. And that is also why some people say that these are called adjectival clauses. Some people also call them relative clauses because they relate to the noun that they are describing. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, so there are two types of relative clauses, defining and non-defining, okay? Relative clauses without commas provide essential information. What do we mean when we say essential information? We mean that this information is very important to the meaning of the sentence, and the sentence will be difficult to understand or wouldn't be so clear without this piece of information, okay? So we would say something like, the student who tries really hard will probably pass the exam. In this case, we mean that not all students are going to try to pass the exam, only the student who tries really hard. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, and then we have another example. Relative clauses with commas provide additional information that can be omitted. This is to say that if we remove this clause, the sentence will continue to make sense and will be very clear, okay? So we can say something like, the student who tries really hard will probably pass the exam. The meaning in this sentence is very different because in this case, we're talking about a specific student, okay? And we are saying that the core meaning of this sentence is that this student is very likely to pass the exam, okay? As an additional piece of information, we are adding that he or she tries really hard. Do you understand the difference?
Yes.
Okay, so as you can see,
Yes.
this is a very similar sentence, almost an identical sentence, okay? And the addition of commas can change the meaning completely,
Mhm.
okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
So we can analyze relative pronouns now, okay? Relative pronouns can function as the subject of the clause. Remember that we're talking about clauses, okay? And clauses are grammar structures that contain a subject and at least the final verb. So within that analysis, we can say that sometimes these relative pronouns are subjects. And take a look at the first example. He is the student who failed. In this case, we're talking about, we are using who for people. We are trying to identify a person, in this case, a student, okay? Whose student is it that I am talking about? I'm talking about the student who failed, okay?
Okay.
This is what I was saying at the beginning, okay? The relative clause provides more information about a noun. In this case, who failed is identifying the student. Take a look at the second example. This is the exam which the student failed. In this case, we are using the relative pronoun which to talk about things. Which thing is it that I am talking about? Can you tell me?
Could you repeat?
In the second example, we are using which to talk about things, okay? Which thing is it that I am talking about in that example?
The exam.
The exam, excellent. If you were to analyze this semantically, you would say that exam and which the student failed both refer to the same entity, okay? And then we can also talk about possession via the pronoun whose, the relative pronoun whose, okay? And this is the student whose exam is an embarrassment. The job of whose in this example is to connect student and exam with a relationship of possession. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes relative pronouns can function as an object. And this is very important for you to understand because it is in these cases where we can omit the relative pronoun. Okay. So we can say something like, this is a student who I failed. Again, as we said before, we use who for people. And in this case, I can omit the relative pronoun who, and I can say, this is a student I failed. Do you understand?
Yes.
I have used a lot of students and fail and pass as examples, okay? Don't take it personally.
Mister,
Yes?
could you tell me the patterns of everyone?
If I could tell you the patterns, what do you mean by patterns?
Yes. I mean about if it is subject, verb, object.
I think you refer to the analysis of clause elements and the sentence patterns.
Yes.
They are no different than the ones that you know so far. Okay, you can repeat those patterns in the structure, in the internal structure of the clauses that make up a complex sentence. In this case, in the case of relative clauses, we have two types, as we have been saying so far. Okay, one in which the relative pronoun functions as the subject, and in this case, you cannot omit it. Okay, take a look at the first examples. He is a student who failed. In this case, you cannot remove who because otherwise the sentence will be nonsensical. You will come up with something like, he is a student failed. And that makes no sense, okay? And that is incorrect. But in the second example, this is a student who I failed. Then you can also have a sentence without who or without that because we can also use that for people. So this is the student I failed is completely correct. And you can also have an example with things, as in the second example. This is the pen I used to fail exams. Okay, as we said before, in this case, which is used to make reference to a thing that in this case is the pen. Do you understand?
Yes, yes.
This is not from real life, okay? I have many pens to fail exams. You can also have relative clauses to talk about time, place, and reason, okay? In this case, we are going to use when, where, and why. Typically, some people call them relative adverbs and not relative pronouns, okay? Let's begin with place. In order to talk about place, we can say something like, this is the room where the student failed the exam. And in this case, this is a defining clause, okay? It's defining because it's giving essential information which is important in order to understand the meaning of the sentence. And then we have a non-defining example. The room where many students failed is being painted at the moment. In this case, as we said before, the essential and the core meaning of the sentence is that the room is being painted. And we are providing some extra information by saying that in this room, many students failed. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, so then we can talk about time as well, and we can say something like 2020 was the year when the students couldn't attend classes. And in this case, this is a defining clause, okay? We are talking about information which is vital in order to understand the meaning of the sentence, okay? And we can also say something like, 2020, when classes were called off, meant that students and teachers had to reshape education. And in this second example, this is a non-defining clause. You can see this at the first glance by the use of commas. And when you analyze the sentence, you can also understand that the meaning is that students and teachers had to reshape education in 2020. And an extra piece of information is given and it is that in this year, classes were called off. Do you know the meaning of called off? Called off means cancelled, okay?
Yes.
I know you knew, but connection is bad sometimes, okay?